No more trees, I've got too many. Hi, welcome. This is Jelle, growing bonsai. And here I have a very nice Scots pine. It is a little bit yellow looking, but that is because we're in the middle of winter, it's seen a lot of rain, a lot of frost. I got this tree 2 weeks ago at the Bonsai Trophy. It was affordable at a reasonable price. And what you see, it has a very nice thick trunk, bit of movement in this trunk, and a very heavy branch. And this branch I am actually imagining as a sort of a side canopy coming into this area here. For that I will need to figure out how the roots are, because here at the base there's a big root and there might be more roots here down below. I'm not going to work on the tree now. I'm first going to let it recover a little bit. Maybe I'll replant it once it is a little bit warmer. We are still early March. It's still freezing overnight. So this is just going to sit in the sun. I've fertilized it. I'm going to keep it as dry as I can. And I'll get back to you with the next phase once I start working on it. So we've hit spring. Time to look at the pine. What I've done, I have scratched away the top surface of the soil. So now I can see the roots. And if I look at the roots in the back are much lower than the ones in the front. So in fact I can plant it up pretty much like this later on. Now the roots in the back and in the front are at the same height. There's a very nice nebari. There's lots of roots all around the trunk. So I can plant it in any position I want. Although with pines it's not all that important, the nebari. This means that this is going to be my future top. This is probably going to be removed. This is going to come down. 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 There's going to be a tiny little tree here. And this branch is going to go here. That's what I'm going to do right now. I've got a steel bar, which I'm going to connect at the back to the trunk, creating an anchor point to pull this upward. Then I have a raffia, and this raffia I'm going to wind around this branch. The branch, as you can see, has a cloth. This cloth is soaked in water. It has been on here for maybe 3-4 hours. So now the bark is nice and wet. This helps the bark to extend a little bit. Still, that doesn't mean that I can just in one big push bend this over. This might be 1 or 2 days before I can bend it all the way, if I don't want the whole trunk to break off. So let's get started. Let's put some raffia on there. Put the steel bar in the back. Protective tubing is not a luxury in this case. And then I'll start bending. Raffia is the bark of a palm, and it is very, very strong. It's very hard to break. Very high tensile strength. Yet, if it is wet, it gets a tiny little bit longer than when it is dry. So if you put this over the bark, and as it dries, it compresses on the bark, which will give you a very nice hold for the tree. And the branches won't break all that easily if you do this. I'm just going to wrap the whole branch in the raffia. Nice and tight, so it compresses the branch. And once I start bending, the branch can't actually break because it's being held together with the raffia. This is a bit of a clumsy process, so I'm not going to film me doing all of this. As you can see, I am holding the end by itself. It is now self-compressing, which is nice. And once this is all wrapped into raffia, I can actually start bending the branch. So what I've done, I have put the steel piece of rebar here, connected it to the base of the trunk and at the branch that I'm going to bend. And I have connected it here on the top, that once we start pulling here, it doesn't just bend away. This will actually help strengthen this anchor point. I'm now going to bend this part up in this direction. For this I have a couple of tools. Two in fact. One which is slow going, which you can put on an anchor point and slowly turn the buckle to bend. But I'm first going to try what happens if I just use the normal branch bender and a piece of wire. Effectively you just put this over the branch that you want to bend, at the spot where you want to bend it, right there. This will pull it up, because I'm going to just tilt like this. And you can see it comes up quite easily. this is what I'm going to try and do, but I only have 2 hands. So at the branch that I want to bend, I found a fork and I've put a rubber tubing behind it, copper wire through it, and connected that to the rebar that I'm going to use as an anchor. And now I can just gently pull with my hands to bring it up a little bit already, and then tie the wire together. So I can pull and tighten. And now already my end is way too long. I'm going to clip it back and repeat. Pull tight, tighten. So this is a way that you can bend a branch alone if you don't actually have someone nearby who can give you a hand. Now we're getting to the point that I need to take care of the branches, that they don't get squeezed in, but that's still okay. And let it rest a little bit again. As I'm noticing that this is starting to bend a lot compared to this, I'm adding a new wire here, lower on the trunk, to really pull the lower end of the trunk in. I don't want the main trunk to break, and I want it to come up as much as possible as a whole. Now these wires support each other. Look at that. Now as you're bending the tree, keep track of what you're doing, because I could easily have bent a little bit further, but I don't need to. The trunk line now matches the trunk line of the master tree. Well, that's a surprise. This whole bending exercise took about 2 hours with pauses in between. But now this trunk is upright instead of standing horizontal here. It is as close to the rebar as possible. And now it's just a matter of wiring the whole thing out and making it a nice little tree. You can see there's one main trunk going up, and then one of the branches has gotten the idea, I'm also going to be a tree. Then I'm going to fill it out here. These small branches I'm going to use for the tree. This bigger one is going to go because it's almost as thick as the trunk, but I have a small one here. Yeah, let's get some wire the whole thing out and see what we can make of it. So it's been a couple of days. I had to stop, it just got too late. And now I am back in the shed. It is pouring with rain. It's still in March. We still don't have spring. Well, we have spring, but the weather is not nice. In any case, this pine, what we've done, we've shaped this side of the tree. This small branch has come up. And now I need to decide what to do with this side. So here one branch has already been put in place, but here the top is not sure what has to happen. Of course, here I have a nice little side branch which fills in the gap nicely here. But besides that, there's nothing over this whole section on the left side to fill. This I could of course bring down in here, But then I'd have just only this big branch as my top that then needs to go further up. And then you get quite a tall tree. It is an option, but not ideal maybe. The alternative would be to take this branch, notch it, bring it up, and make this the top of my tree. Then I'd have a side branch here which can go more in the back. I have a side branch here which can be positioned there. I have a back branch again in the top and a side branch in the top, and the whole thing can over time just fill out. So that's the other option. Then I still have this branch here which is in a very awkward position. Normally you don't want all these branches low, but this is a pine, and it is a pine with a bit of a crazy shape. So this little branch I'm thinking about keeping here in the back as a back branch, and this branch as a whole I'm thinking about creating a third little canopy right here. So that means bringing this one up a little bit, bending this quite drastically so it comes with this tip all the way in here, and then I can bring this small branch here in the back down again. It's going to be a bit of a creative tree. It's not going to be a tree that fits all the bonsai standards, because this steel rod is kept in place with a tension wire to the top. I cannot just cut this off all the way. So I'm just going to go halfway. Then this will become a little bit more flexible, because right now it doesn't move. So I'm going to cut at a slant. Basically the connection of the branch goes into the trunk. There is not a lot of sap transport going up. The most important ones are going to go down on this side of the trunk. So I'm just going to make a slanted cut, a little bit down, a little bit in, right at the connection point. And make a wick. So this is going to be a strenuous bend. So also here add raffia around the areas that are going to be bent. Now with the wedge here gone, I can in fact bend this more easily. So I'm first going to apply the copper wire to the side branch and the main branch, so later on I can more easily bend it. And then I'm going to put a wire here and compress in that direction so it becomes almost vertical. Note I'm bending the branch and then I'm tightening the wire. I'm not trying to bend the branch using just the wire. So I didn't pay attention, and here the branch is broken. So it looks like this part might die off, but I don't know. So I'm just going to leave it in place. Now this can go all the way down. Let's see whether I can do that. Like that. And slowly it is starting to come together. So early summer, very nice to see. The tree is pushing nicely and it has survived, and not much has died off. There's one little branchlet here that has damaged, but besides that everything is pushing. But one thing that I'm noticing is that there's quite a few needles that are browning. So what we have here is a fungal infection which infects the needles, and you can see it as little dots and lines in the needle itself, and it just stays hidden in the needle for the whole winter. Then in spring, as the tree starts to push, it starts expanding in the needle, parts of the needle die off and spores come out. Now the fungicide that you ideally use for this is not available in Europe, so what I do, I typically spray these with regular fungicide for ornamental plants. But at this stage, as the needles are starting to come out, I pluck away the old needles. And by removing all these old needles, I am making sure that there's no spores available to reinfect the needles. Naturally, you need to make sure you do this on all the pines that are infected in your area. So if you're living in the middle of a pine forest, you might be out of luck. But this severely reduces the infection for the next year. And next year can just go through and pull out individual needles that are clearly infected. But this year, I am afraid this is the best solution if you can't get a proper fungicide. There's a big downside: Scots pine backbuds through the old needles. So if there's no more needles along the branch, backbudding is a lot harder. The other side, if I leave the fungal infection, it's only going to get worse. So I'm going to thin it out, going to remove the worst needles, and then hope that that solves the issue for next year. Naturally, it is important to collect these needles and not leave them in the garden. Sanitize the area around a pine like this. Collect all the old needles and don't leave them laying around, because the spores come from the old needles where the fungal infection has taken place. This work of course removes about 70 or 80% of the photosynthetic capacity of the tree, which means it is severely weakened. To solve this, I'm going to put it in full sun, fertilize heavily, water whenever it needs. Fortunately, it is in a very open, dry substrate, so I can water lots and lots and lots without having the problem of the roots suffering. And yeah, for the rest of the season, no other work is done. No more wiring, no more repositioning of branching, and no pruning of the extensions. This will have to wait until maybe next year. For now, the focus is on getting this healthy, growing strongly, lots of power, and then hopefully next year I can continue the development. So another 2 weeks have passed. You can see the needles are pushing, the tree is healthy and growing. This of course is a sacrifice. This top is all going to go. This is the actual top of the tree. Main branches are set. I hope that this year I'll get some backbudding in here. Maybe I can push the foliage in a little bit more, but for now this is all it is. Just more sun, letting it grow. Who knows, maybe next year in a new pot, separate this one, would be nice. That's also the point when I start looking at all these dead stumps, removing them, reducing them. But for now they're nice anchor points, so I've left them on. Pretty much a first styling of a tree, setting up the main branches. Yeah, that's it. How big this tree is. It doesn't fit on my background, look at that.